Right, hello, welcome back to the Cine Skinny. It's the film podcast from the Skinny. It's me, Peter Simpson, with Lewis Robertson.
Hello.
Jamie Dunn.
Hello.
And Nighy Barrows.
Hi.
We're back in Upload Studios in Leith to talk about the films. It's maybe not going to be a thigh slapper this week, as there's a couple of quite serious films to talk about, but we are also going to shout a lot about how Margaret Thatcher is bad.
Which is always a good time.
That's going to be a fun...
That's a fun time.
That's going to be fun banter all the way. Jamie is ostensibly on holiday from work today and has brought the energy of someone who is on holiday but still wants to stick their oar in, so that's good. And me and Lewis have been in the office on our own all morning, and I think we've both gone a little bit stir crazy because we had the blinds all shut at one point.
Yes, we were
as well,
watching the weather oscillate wildly from sun to rain to sun to rain to snow at one point.
Yeah, we've been having a great time. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Blue Jean, the new film from George Oakley. We're going to be talking about Saint Omer, Alice Diop's new film. We're going to be talking about Thatcher, bad, brackets, films about, and some other bits as well. But we'll start off with the customary, what has everyone been watching? Jamie, do you want to go first?
Well, like the rest of the world, I've been watching The Last of Us.
Oh, is it good? No, not
I'm a little bit disappointed so far, but people have been going crazy for episode 3. So,
how many have come out in the UK?
3 so far.
Okay,
but I haven't seen the third one.
Okay.
I'm enjoying the fact that it's non-linear, so it's sort of, every episode sort of flashes back to a time in the past, and I feel like that puts something new in context in the new episode. But great cast. I can't complain about the cast. I just feel like I've seen it before. Like I feel like I've not seen anything brand new, so I'm hoping that there's going to be something different, because it just seems to me like your standard zombie apocalypse thing right now. Although that's pleasingly enjoyable. I just feel like people are going a bit crazy for it.
It's kind of the reason I never played the game, is because when the game came out, I thought like it looks very like good and emotive and polished, but I was sort of like, well, it's just zombies, isn't it? Like they're sort of weird mushroom zombies, but they're just...
Is it like the narrative or something?
Yeah, people like to get attached to the characters and stuff like that, and it's like and that's why it's probably been adapted into a TV series, because it's such a good story. But I don't really know what's super different about it.
I think, as far as I know from people I know who've played and loved The Last of Us, it is a video game that is actually quite well written, which then translates into a TV show that you would want to watch. Whereas most video games, we were talking about this on the bus down, most video game stories are actually quite derivative of other media like film and TV and books, and the joy of the video game is you get to play as the main character from the book or film or TV show.
Yeah,
it's why when people say you should make Grand Theft Auto into a film, that film already exists, and it's one of those straight to video ones with
So do people say that? Who is saying that?
Well, when people say like, oh, this game's very popular, if only it were a film.
Yeah, but people saying that about Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Well, I mean, like, they made Doom into a film.
I'm not saying they're right. This is what the people say.
Made Doom into a film, which is a game that people love because you get to run around and smash monsters up, and then they made a film of it, and everyone was like, well, this isn't a good film.
No.
I was like, I know.
This is the thing with The Last of Us, right? Is that the context of like video game adaptations have been so bad that maybe it's just that this one is good.
Perhaps, but also people just like love hyperbole. So like, if anything is like moderately decent, like people go crazy for it. So basically Twitter is full of shit,
Great.
Shots fired early doors. Lewis, you got anything else to say other than everyone's wrong about a thing that they all like?
On Last of Us?
No, just generally. What have you been watching?
I haven't been watching a lot of TV for a change, but I'm sort of caught up with the Oscar noms in a way that I'm usually not. So I wasn't planning on watching All Quiet on the Western Front. I haven't read the book or seen the other film adaptation. And also 1917, I didn't really like it. Sort of left a bad taste in my mouth as the last sort of war film that everyone went crazy about. But my partner is a fan of the book, as much as you can be a fan of the book. But so we watched it the way that all 2.5-hour anti-war epics are meant to be watched, which is on the shitty Netflix app on my PlayStation. And yeah, it's like the thing where I get why it got an Oscar nomination. It's again that sort of like film as tech expo where it's like, look at all the new ways we can realistically depict people getting blown up. But other than that, there's nothing to me about the filmmaking or the screenwriting that like restates the relevance of the book. There's this, I think it's inserted for the film, is this like intrigue plot about an evil general who wants to keep the war going, who I guess is meant to represent, you know, the many generals who like were, you know, ignorant to the atrocities that were going on. But, you know, it's that thing where it's like, I don't really need that to know that war is bad, especially if I'm like watching All Quiet on the Western Front. I just think it's like Avengers Endgame levels of gratuitous violence and things being blown up. And I think that like framing it as isn't it sad that they're all like young boys who are going to die, doesn't really take away from the fact that we're sensationalizing this violence. So I get, again, why it got nominated for an Oscar. I just really hope it doesn't win, like, Best Picture or anything
I don't
like
think
that.
it will win Best Picture. No.
But, like, yeah. So that's me. All Quiet on the Western Front.
I guess the thing with because I studied the book in first year of uni, and the thing with it was that it was, like, so remarkable as, like, showing the depth of, like, the atrocities that were happening. And it was, like, one of the first to kind of be doing that in this, like, explicitly anti-war way, which is very interesting. And I guess now, if you want to adapt that, like, how would you do that? So maybe it's kind of bringing it. why am I talking about this? I haven't actually seen the film, but I'm just like,
yeah,
be bold, Nighy.
I'm very receptive to sort of like.
speculating.
I'm very receptive to someone saying, "Hey, there's a new sort of anti-war film. We're taking the idea of All Quiet on the Western Front, and we're kind of like trying to make it restate its relevance. You know, try and like get a wider appeal." And I think that they haven't really done that, other than using that technology that Marvel and Disney use to make the war look extra explosive, which just doesn't really amount to much for me. But I should read the book, and I'm sure it's very good.
I mean, the Academy love a war film is the thing. Like, it will always just be nominated.
Like, my problem with 1917, which this doesn't necessarily have, is that it was unnecessarily othering. Like, 1917 for a film set during World War I, which, you know, you kind of have to state there's no bad guys in World War I, but in 1917, we follow these two British soldiers, and they meet, like, ruthless Germans at every impasse. They, like, save a German from a burning plane, and then he gets his knife out and tries to attack them, and then they, like, find that the Germans have rigged their abandoned bunkers to explode for no reason other than they're just evil. So it's, like, a pretty thoughtless film, 1917, but again, like, yeah, I guess it is impressive if you're in a cinema and the explosion's really, really loud, and that person's being blown to bits in a way that resembles someone being blown to bits in real life.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to defend Sam Mendes, given that he made Empire of Light, and that's such a fucking terrible film. But I really like 1917, so I might unfortunately have to. But no, I know what you mean. It is reductive. I think all war films, to a certain extent, are reductive. Like, if you're representing that, like, there's a kind of certain power implicit in representation, I guess. Yeah.
Many Oscar noms, but does not get the coveted Lewis Robertson seal of approval.
Are we going to do an Oscar chat? I guess we'll save all our Oscar opinions for that. Or are we going to?
Are we going to do it like before the Oscars?
Well, any first impressions? Or
I mean, that's stupid. It's my main first impression.
Yeah, I have just been like, haven't seen that one. Which one's that one?
Like, the fact that Avatar got nominated for Best Picture above After Sun is ridiculous.
I mean, I'm kind of quite up for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Even though I'm out of the four of us, I'm probably the least in love with that film. I love all the performances, and I was so heartened to see them win at the Golden Globes. Like, my heart for everyone in that film is like bursting. So that's the one sort of bright spot for me. And I think they might win. Like, imagine, Michelle,
I think they will win. Yeah, I think so. Which is nice. That is very nice.
Like, how can they top those? Like, KQ, is it KQ who is his name?
KQ1?
Yeah, like his speech was like so beautiful. Like, how can he top that? It's like, I don't know. But then also I would quite happily see Barry Keoghan win, or like Colin Farrell's probably win. I'm kind of rooting for all the favourites this year, which I don't usually do.
Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of like people that I like that got nominated. I think across the board though, like, and I think especially like the Best Picture, Best Director was a joke. Like, that was really stupid. Like, it was just like a bunch of like men.
Yeah.
You know, and like for films that felt very like The Fabelmans and things like that, it's just very.
Oh, Steven Spielberg, like that amateur.
Well, no, like, I liked it, but it feels like a career nomination. Do you know what I mean?
It's that thing where it's like, you know, what's unpleasant to me about the Oscars is like you say, this year it's actually like a lot of really good people who are like championing these films that everyone seems to love, but a lot of the time it's like, you know, I don't really care about Leonardo DiCaprio, and I don't want to watch people who are already intensely rich and famous and probably like in a very sketchy way get dressed up and pat each other on the back. Like, you know, it's a sort of ceremonial idolatry.
Yeah, it's industry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is the thing.
I mean, it is going to be doubly funny when Steven Spielberg wins now.
He's not going to win.
When they give it to James Cameron. Yes.
Oh my God, stop.
Let's roll.
He didn't get nominated for director.
But he'll be up there getting his producer thing for Avatar. I finally did it. I showed you all the way of the water. Anahi, what have you been watching?
I have been watching a lot of Friends.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff.
That's all I've got to say on that
Cool.
matter.
Probably as good a place as any to move on.
Yep.
Right, first up today is Omer, which is Alice Diop's debut feature film, winner of the Grand Jury Prize at the Venice Film Festival. It stars Kaije Kagame as Rama, who is a writer attending the trial of Laurence Coley, who is played by Ghuslaji Malanda, who is a woman accused of murdering her 1-year-old daughter. So the film is based on a real-life court case which Alice Diop attended, and yeah, it's her first feature, but her background is in documentaries, which she's been making for about a decade now. Alice Diop's been making documentaries. So yeah, background in documentary, which really does come across Lewis in Omer, doesn't it?
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about Alice Diop, but, you know, I liked this film. It was really interesting, so I did a bit of Googling around and found out her sort of like a history with documentary, and it totally makes sense for the film. It makes sense that this is her first like narrative fiction film, because the entire time I was thinking how interestingly it was structured, that we have this main character, right? We know that Rama is our main character. She's the one who sort of carries us from scene to scene, and yet she has the least dialogue, she has the least bearing on the plot, the least sort of involvement in the scenes. And I think it's really the, you know, nature of a documentarian to create a main character who is an observer or spectator, who sees this highly publicized trial and has it like impact their worldview and speak to their anxieties. And it's still well done. That's the thing. Like, we still recognize an emotive change in Rama, even though she says virtually nothing. But it is just very much like fly on the wall. And we sort of learned as well that Alice Diop has this very particular story where she went to a very similar real life trial, I think also while pregnant, so sort of like fills the role of, is very autobiographical. And yeah, it's just, it's a really sort of measured exploration into the feelings that come up with these kind of spectator trials. And I think people will like this film. I think like people who typically don't go and see foreign language films will definitely get a lot out of this. I think as well because the courtroom setting means that people sort of take their turn to speak and say things with such clarity, and then the interpretation is largely done in your head. You're encouraged to make your own judgments. So I really like this film. I think that it matches up quite well with the work that Alice Diop seems to have done so far. But I know that, Peter, you were a little less keen on it for that reason.
Well, I felt that I think the thing is that it is a little bit, to my eyes, stagey. And I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, just that there are a lot of long speeches and a lot of focus on individual kind of like, not monologues, but like long conversations. In a way, Jamie, it's quite an unusual film in the way that it's structured and the way that it unwinds the story that it's telling.
Yeah, it did knock me for six a little bit, because I was kind of expecting. I heard this was great. All I heard was like buzz saying I need to see it, and I think I was maybe expecting something a bit more straightforward, like a normal kind of courtroom drama, but it's not that at all. It's interesting you mentioned documentarian, because like, yes, her style is documentary in that she observes. She just lets the camera observe. There's no kind of editorializing. She doesn't do anything fancy with the camera. There's no dramatic music. No editing to like suggest to let us interpret it. So we just gotta like look at the performance and sort of make up our own minds. So that is very much like a documentary, but in other ways it's not like a documentary at all. It's so mysterious. Like you know, if you want to go and know what happened in this case, I think you're going to struggle, because it intentionally is subjective. Like we're kind of seeing things from Rama's point of view, and sometimes like Rama will tune out and not listen to what's happening. So it'll go from being very very clear what's happening, where we're having a statement from either the judge or the woman on trial, but then Rama will look out the window and she'll flash back to her own childhood, and it seems to be much more about a film about motherhood and about being an immigrant. It's dealing with those two kind of clashes and not clashes, those two sort of states of being, and also being the kind of isolation that comes from this. So like so it turns out Rama is pregnant as well, and she's an immigrant, but she also has other similarities. She also has it seems like they both women had kind of uneasy relationships with their mother, like sort of quite a cold relationships. We see like flashbacks to Rama, and sometimes it's also home video footage, and it seems like her and her mother didn't get on, or her mother didn't acknowledge her almost. And yeah, this weird thing about, you know, you grow someone inside you. It's hard for me to comprehend as somebody who's never going to give birth. It's given, you know, you create a child, it's part of you, but also it's this separate thing. And I think it's dealing with that kind of that strange feeling of being a mother, and like how do you feel your life sort of changes by becoming a mother. You know, this young woman who had all this promise. She was going to be, you know, she's a great thinker. She had ambitions to be a philosopher, but she comes up against racism at university. But also having a baby changes all that as well. She becomes isolated because of her partner. Her partner, we hear in the testimony that he was sort of ashamed of her. He would sort of hide her away from her family. So yeah, it's not really about the story at all. It's about the state of being a woman who's isolated, and Rama sort of recognizing the same feeling that she's having with this woman in the courtroom. So it's a really kind of intelligent film, really. It's like and I think you have to bring a lot to it and sort of join together all of the dots, because if you're just expecting a cathartic, why did this woman kill her baby, you're not going to get that answer. It's not really interested in that answer. It's more interested in why this woman feels like this in the first place. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. That's sort of what I mean by, well, documentarian, in the sense that you're right. Like, we have a character who's sitting here observing this thing, and it's that processing of like, this relates to me. This doesn't relate to me in some ways, but it does relate to me in a lot of ways. And seeing that overlap, because there's so many, like you say, sort of social elements that are involved in this trial. And I think that kind of is encouraging people to think like documentarians, because that's what a documentarian does, right? They find a story and they identify what people will connect to or won't connect to, how it pertains to them personally, or on a broader scale, what social issues it brings up. So it very much, I think, is like a step into an interesting way of mythologizing one's experiences in a non-documentarian form, but it's very much like trained in the way that a documentarian would do it.
Yeah, I think mythologizing is a good word. It's almost like, despite this is a contradiction. It's based on a real case. They use verbatim testimony. You know, so characters speaking exactly the way they were in the trial. Yet it has a kind of real kind of allegorical quality, I think. You know, and obviously Medea is like what Rama's studying. So it's like almost like a myth or something. I don't know. There's something really strange going on, and I've got to say I didn't quite get all its mysteries, but I just love how it's not doing what I expected it to do, as it's not being a courtroom drama, and it's not telling me about this specific case as much as it's creating a kind of a kind of mythical space or something.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, like, you described it as an intelligent film, and I think it is a profoundly intelligent film, and I think she is a profoundly intelligent thinker. Like, I interviewed her, and it was genuinely the most fascinating conversation I've ever had in my life. Like, I could barely keep up. Like, she was so fucking smart. And I think what she does with this film, and I am one of the people that, like, thinks this film is one of the best things ever made. Like, I think it's remarkable. And I think it is that kind of, bringing together of this sort of crime genre, courtroom drama, and then this kind of Medea myth, which Alice Diop has, like, talked about, that was, like, what the parallels between Fabienne, who's, like, the woman that this is based on, her story, and then the Medea myth was what, like, drew her to it. And with this film, like, on the surface, everything is just, like, so restrained, so quiet, like, so very procedural. But it's like what she's investigating is the procedure of testimonial of this woman, Laurence Colly, in the film, like making her own narrative and telling her own account. And in that way, it does kind of become like a bit of a reclamation of the Medea myth, and that she has like a power to a certain extent over her narrative. And it is really interesting thinking about this kind of in relation to The Lost Daughter that came out last year, and this kind of growing kind of genre of cinema about like maternal ambivalence and about maternal difficulty. But here, what's like really fascinating about this film is that it's like with this added lens of like these women, and especially Laurence Colly, who's on trial, being a black woman, who's like someone whose body and whose subjectivity is already considered abject, who's already like considered monstrous, who can't be understood through like the reductive narratives that everyone is like projecting onto her. And I just think it's like such a, like you say, it is that kind of combination, this sort of clash between these two genres that kind of creates this very like haunted liminal space. And yeah, like the kind of what I think about most when I think of this film is those moments where you're either in the courtroom or Rama is walking down the street, and it's like you say, almost quite documentary, and it's very like naturalistic. And then that like music, the score kicks in, and it's like kind of a Greek chorus in like Panic. And it's just like so like this kind of haunting energy that's like kind of similar to like Margaret Diop's Atlantics. I don't know if anyone saw that, but that kind of almost like magical realism, the idea of like myth being made so natural that it becomes like uncanny and you feel like frightened by it. And it's just like so meticulously done. Like she has such power over every part of the narrative, over every movement of the camera. It's just so clever. I'm just like, how did that come out of someone's brain?
Yeah.
I just think it's very cool.
I just feel like maybe it's sometimes you see a film and you feel like, oh, I'm missing something, because I feel like maybe I saw it on a big screen or something. For example, there's a moment where Laurence looks at Rama. It's the only time she looks at her on the whole film. She kind of turns around. Most of the film, you've seen it from the judge's point of view, or from I think maybe some other angle. But she just turns around. She looks directly in Rama's eye, and she gives her this kind of smile. It's this kind of knowing smile, and it's like really unsettling, and it really unsettles Rama as well. And I just wasn't too sure what I was meant to think of this, because like I say, it's this tension of realism, and you know, there's talk of an evil eye perhaps some cast on it, and you're never exactly sure what the. I just found I struggled to get the meaning, and clearly Rama is settled, and she goes back to her hotel and she's reeling. But I wasn't exactly sure why she was reeling, and I think I'm just like missing something.
All of it, you know, like from what I understand, it's the fact that like we come to this film as like an audience looking for, like you say, this kind of singular meaning or this singular answer. And what like the courtroom is doing, what like the justice system does, what narrative does, like all of this, we're trying to be like, did you do it or did you not? Like, are you a victim or are you a perpetrator? Like, were you victimized by your white husband, or are you actually like kind of this, like the Medea myth is like about this like enraged, crazy woman, right? Like that's how we understand it. Like, which are you? And I think a lot of what like Alice Diop is doing is she's being like, yeah, it's kind of both. And actually you can't really, like there is just a real complexity to these stories that anything that we try to use to kind of find a singular narrative out of it is just going to fail. And I think in a way it is therefore about like almost the failure of narrative, which is like a really interesting thing to make a film about. But yeah, I think definitely the first time I watched it as well, it is just, because like you say, it's these little moments. It's someone looking at someone. But then in real life, that's also like what fucks you up, right?
Yeah, like that sort of little smile to me is like a big moment of the rebellion of the subject of this film, this thing that is there to be observed, this public trial that we're all looking at, either as people with our own moral judgments, or as documentarians, or as, you know, whatever, people who may or may not connect to these social issues or these personal issues. The most important thing about this is that we're observing it and they're not observing us. And that imbalance of power is part of what's really uncanny about this film.
Yeah.
That like eerie suggestion that there's so much more going on than the objective nature that we apply to people like in that situation. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was like very, I don't know, it was just like, I just had it on in the flat and my partner came through just while I had the last like few minutes on, and he just shut up and started watching, because it's this like tone that is imbibed throughout the entire film that is so capturing. And I think it would have been great to see it in cinema. I think I might go see it in cinema. I don't know when the release date is. Peter, maybe
It's
you can...
Friday?
Friday?
Yeah, it's on the 2nd of February.
3rd of February.
And like
3rd
I
of
say, people who don't typically go and see foreign language films might really enjoy this, because the language, though it's got so much, like you say, it's so intelligent, there's so much packed into little things like smiling at each other, or the sort of these silent flashbacks. The language itself is very simplistic. There's a point in one of the few examples of dialogue is when Rama is talking to Lawrence's mother, and it's like, were you born in Paris? Yes. Do you have brothers or sisters? 2 sisters. And it's like, it's just like standard grade French said it was going to be. Like, it's great. It's just like out of a textbook.
Yeah, because Lanky Melanda as well, she's so good. Like, she's mesmerizing. It's like she hypnotizes you almost, and she gives this really unusual performance that doesn't really give anything away, but is like also deeply emotional. I don't know how to describe it. She's like not. I wouldn't say it's like it's not like you'd imagine the American version would be like histrionic or something. She would break down. There's a few moments where she does, but it's so calm and collected, but just full of emotion. And the way she's shot is really interesting as well, because and the way she's dressed, like she wears like a kind of brown jumper, her skin's brown, and then she's against this brown background, and she's like almost like she's fading into the background, and that's what the film's about, is this woman who's invisible. She was hidden away in this apartment while she had this baby on her own, completely isolated. The isolation of it is really interesting. So yeah, just fascinating film. I think it is cinematic. I know you mean it is quite static, but it is doing things with the camera that's quite interesting, and when it happens, because it's been so still and static, when it does something, it kind of jolts you, you know.
So Saint Omer is out on the 3rd, of February.
Okay.
I think it's getting a wide release. It's on at the Cameo in Edinburgh and the GFT in Glasgow and various other places. So that's Saint Omer. Go and check it out. All right, and next up is Blue Jean. So this is the debut film by Georgia Oakley. It's set in northeast England in the 1980s against the backdrop of Section 28, which was Tory legislation that basically banned the quote-unquote promotion of homosexuality by local authorities. So this meant that like councils who run schools couldn't do anything to promote or really say anything about anything other than heterosexual relationships. So the gene of the title is a high school PE teacher and netball coach who is also gay, has a partner, has an active social life, has a close-knit group of pals. And the film is basically following her attempts to try and negotiate and navigate these two sides of her life that in the political climate of the time, under decree of Tory shitbags, not things that you are allowed to navigate at the same time. So, Jamie, Blue Jean, what did you think?
Well, I think the thing that really struck me first was Rosa McCune's performance. She is so clenched and measured, and she just never looks relaxed, and she looks always stressed, and it's because she is stressed. At school, she's really uncomfortable because she's constantly having to kind of maneuver around her colleagues and avoid questions about her private life, because she knows that she can't just be open, because, she will be under scrutiny if she is. She teaches. It's no accident that she's been given the job as a PE teacher, because that's like one of the most intimate jobs as a teacher. You've got to. The kids are physical. You've got to control them. You've obviously got the problem with changing rooms. So she's under scrutiny. She feels stressed about this situation at work. And then when she goes to her family, she's also got this stress because they are not that supportive. She's got this horrible brother-in-law. Her sister is a bit dismissive. Her sister still has pictures of her wedding day, when obviously it's not exactly clear what happened in the wedding, but she's clearly not happy. So yeah, so around family she's not happy, and then when she's with her lesbian friends, she also feels a little bit out of the loop, because she feels that she's not embracing the lifestyle enough, or they feel that she's a bit uptight, and so it's just a really tense performance, and her face is incredible. She's the most interesting looking actor. She looks like David Bowie or something, because she's got this kind of blonde hair, this really kind of androgynous look, angular, just all cheekbones and angles, and yeah, the camera just loves her. She follows her around, and I think a lot of the story kind of falls on her performance, really. The film itself also looks brilliant. It's called Blue Jean, and the color blue kind of permeates. It's as if the warmth has been sucked out of this world. You know how you think of like 80s films. You think of like, I don't know. You think of like George Michael, and you think of like neon and like everybody's having fun. Like that is clearly not reached the Northeast. Like this is like the most bleak
Place
kind
of perennially bad lighting.
Exactly. And yeah, I loved all that look of it. Like everything's kind of aquamarine, and like the set design is like everything's. There's no kind of warm colours at all. It was really interesting. Where I think the film might fall down a bit is I feel like it can become a bit, and I know he's going to shout at me this word. I thought it was a little bit soapy. Like I felt like I felt like it kind of made its point and then continually made its point. And I felt like it for a film that was quite short, like an hour and 40, it felt long to me. It felt like it was kind of repeating a lot of the same questions. But yeah, I think there's great things in it. I think the best thing is the community it portrays, which comes out towards the end. You know, it's like really joyous, actually. You know, so like I say, she feels uncomfortable at the start, but eventually she loosens up and sort of finds joy in this kind of queer community she's found, where, you know, they hang out at these kind of cool bars and play pool, and they go to this kind of like squat and have these parties. So it's a film that's about. It doesn't really sort of, well, because we know like Section 28 stayed around. Like there's no kind of like heroic ending to this. We know it. There's no kind of like she doesn't win, but it's a film that just maybe says that in small acts of rebellion you can win, and it's sort of quite subtle in that way. So I kind of appreciated it wasn't trying to say anything too big. It's a very small story about a big subject, and it says small rebellions can sort of win through, and as long as you've got sort of friends around you, you know, it can push back against all this oppression.
Yeah, I agree. Not with the soapy thing, but with most everything else.
No one
I think
agrees with that.
Like the visibility is, I think, the like keystone of this film. I think it's what will get people really thrilled about it, because it just gives butch queer women, especially as a community, this visibility that they don't usually get on screen. And you know, I think that like I went into it expecting similar things that I'd gotten from other like pro-queer political triumph films, like say Pride. And yeah, of course the politics overlap greatly, but this is very intimate. That the performance, we're with one character, we're with Rosie McEwen throughout all of it, instead of like following the lives of all these different characters. And it's in fact the repeated settings that we keep seeing, her flat or her place of work, that change from a directional standpoint as we go through this like very emotional journey. And it starts out so euphoric and so free and such a great community, and then it becomes very like dark and cagey and very much like, you know, you can't trust anyone around you. And it's nice to see, I don't want to just start like randomly comparing it to films, but it is nice to see that like those intense close-ups and long shots and that eerie soundscape, like the A24 bag of tricks being used on a film that's not just like a horror film or whatever. It's in fact like a really gripping drama. And I would say that like my only criticism was that, well, I'd felt when watching it that it ended quite abruptly. I think because I was still sort of trained for certain tropes by other queer films. I was expecting like a pride parade or like, you know, a protest against Section 28. And, you know, we do get a little bit of that. I mean, like, you know, we see financial activism, which is the least sexy of activisms. And there's a moment where, you know, not to spoil too much, but she's like just sort of laughing with freedom in the sun because she's like had the chance to come out to someone. But I also understand that it has to end in a very normal way. Like you were saying, it has to sort of end in a small victory kind of way, because it has to credit the queer people that remained in the closet for the sake of their livelihoods and honor their place in the queer community. So I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was all revved up, and I kind of went in thinking I should temper my expectations because it's not going to be as great as Pride. But I think that though being a completely different beast, it still is really, really enjoyable, really, really heartwarming.
Nighy, what did you think?
What did I think? I don't think it's soapy. It's one thing I don't think.
Get him.
I think, yeah, this is like a very cleverly done film for reasons that you both said. In that what it's doing is it's locating this like immense law that lasted decades, that came to like define sort of queer history in Britain really like to this day, through this very like contained, very intimate story about not even like a relationship, really about one woman and her interiority, which I think is really clever. One of my favorite things about this film, and I think why it has like stayed with me for so long, is the ways that it kind of articulates desire. So you have like the desire between Jean and her partner Viv, which is like very real, very bodily. It's like very everyday. It's clear that they like really, really fancy each other, but they're also very comfortable with each other. And so it's kind of, like integrating that sort of queer desire into the everyday. And then you have this kind of really interesting through line in the film, which is this kind of younger, more unbound desire that comes from the students that Jean teaches and the ways that they feel about her. Like this bunch of like female, young, like kind of mid-teenagers who are all deeply repressed, like obviously have been brought up even before Section 28 came into law in this very like heteronormative atmosphere, but they have like this real like psychosexual relationship with this teacher who is obviously not interested in them at all. And it's just really good at like tracking how desire kind of like manifests in these different ways. Like there's a scene where Jean is like positioning one of her students' arms to like show them how to like fucking score in netball. Like I don't understand sport, but like to do something in netball. And you can tell that for the student, this is like a real like defining moment in their sexuality. Or this kind of like the dream sequence that you were talking about where they're like running through the gym and everything is like so blurred and so charged. I think it's really important positioning because essentially what Section 28 did was it did like litigate against desire. And I think this film is very like good at understanding the kind of very real costs to kind of everyday intimacy that had. And also to kind of someone's growing intimacy, the way that it was intended as something to quote unquote protect children. But really all it did was like actively harm them. That you have these kids that clearly have this sort of like queer desire that is just being completely tamped down. And yeah, I just think it's very, like you say, very, very small, but just feels like it's doing a lot in a very big way. Yeah, and big shouts out to it as well for making clear just how much of a shithole large parts of Britain were in the 1980s. Yes. Constant low-level drink driving, everyone's smoking inside, grey,
apart from the one that one cafe.
Yeah, where he's like, put out your cigarette. Babe. What?
Why is that just straight there then? I love that scene. Yeah, I think it was really good about the kind of just the constant propaganda, not just of like the actual political propaganda on the news and stuff, and like the speeches are incredible. Like it's actually kind of eye-opening. Like Thatcher
like they just said that.
It's like incredible.
Yeah.
I like that she appears only in hate speeches. I think that it really highlights her Hitler-like qualities.
Yeah,
and you've obviously got like Blind Date is shown as this kind of like weird kind of like Saturday night sort of propping up heteronormative relationships. But obviously why it resonates now is obviously we see this parallels with like the trans community now and like how they're being vilified and how they're said to be dangerous and like a danger to women and children. It's the same sort of tactic book, really. And I think it's great that this film's coming along now, so hopefully people can see the parallels, the clear parallels between the Tories then and the Tories now. They're exactly the same bunch of basically. Yeah. Sorry, I'm allowed to say the C word.
You said it now.
I'm back on side.
Had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Okay, so Blue Jean is out on the 10th of February. Go and see it. It's very, very good.
It's very easy to knock, to rage, to snarl and to satirise. It's so simple, for instance, to knock Mrs. Thatcher, isn't it? But what are you suggesting should go in the place of the institutions and people you so viciously decry? Well, of course, he's absolutely right. It is ludicrously easy to knock Mrs. Thatcher, isn't it? It's the simplest, easiest, and most obvious thing in the world to remark that she's a shameful, putrid scab, an embarrassing, ludicrous monstrosity that makes one frankly ashamed to be British, and that her ideas and standards are a stain on our national history. That's easy. Anyone can see that. Nothing difficult about that.
Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher, everyone's least favourite person, in the words of Anna Heatberry's off of this podcast writing about Blue Jean. The determination of British cinema to not let Margaret Thatcher rest in peace for a second is one of the few things I can stand about this country.
You know what? I stand by it.
Anna Heat with the steel chair. Margaret Thatcher found still dead. So we want to talk about films both made in the Thatcher era or films that look back on it. and look at the way that the British film community has tackled what was a very traumatic and difficult time for the country and the people in it. So naturally, I went off and watched an hour-long Adam Curtis documentary from 1995 for a bit of background. So Adam Curtis, latter-day king of playing Aphex Twin B-sides over the top of BBC News rushes and then telling people that elsewhere something strange was happening. He made this film in 1995 called The Attic, which is not like the most flashy tech thing in the world, but it's a documentary all about the idea that Margaret Thatcher basically used the kind of lore and words and vibe of Winston Churchill in the Second World War to get the public on side with what she was doing in terms of like economics and social policy. Tony Benn appears in the documentary and says something to the effect of, Thatcher wanted to take the country back to the good old days, which was roughly the end of the 19th century. Got to stand a legend, the big man's at it. This film is like, on a kind of cinematic level, it doesn't have huge amounts of flash. I would argue that no one has benefited from easy access to Final Cut Pro more than Adam Curtis. But one interesting element is it intercuts bits of The Innocents, which is a 1961 horror, to make it seem like Deborah Kerr's character is being haunted by the spectre of Winston Churchill.
Why?
As I believe, as an analogy for how Margaret Thatcher was haunted by the ghost of Winston Churchill.
That's so funny. I'm sorry.
It's a banger. I would recommend going and watching it because it's interesting. From like 1995 is like pre-New Labour and all this kind of stuff, but it's interesting as a reminder of the kind of like base failings, misunderstandings, and selfishness at the heart of Thatcherism, and as like a kind of base to see where things were in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Use of war rhetoric to just talk about everyday life, the idea that Britain is bad and it's supposed to be bad, endless talk of how things were better back in the day with no citation or evidence provided, and this kind of like idea that it was calling for basically a reconstruction of what were Victorian / Dickensian like moral values, but with modern economics to make it work. Spoiler, it didn't work. Also, side note, what's up with these Tories and the fucking Victorians? Cut it out, boys. But anyway, so that is the kind of table setting for what Thatcherism is. Bad Victorian pseudo-scientific economics, starting war with Argentina, whole pile of shite. Bad folks, 0 out of 5. But now...
You should teach.
What do you think this podcast is?
That was an amazing lecture. I would listen to it again.
So that's so that's table setting for what we're going to talk about now. So maybe Jamie can go first, because Jamie's notes about the film he wants to talk about start with the phrase, "This is probably the first great film of the Thatcher era." Seems as good a place to start. Long Good Friday.
Yes. So this was made just about a year after she'd come to power as Prime Minister. So 1980. Barry Keefe and director John Mackenzie, who's from Edinburgh actually, there's no way they could kind of have known exactly how prescient their film was going to be. But it does like act as the Thatcher years in miniature. So it's like it centers on this kind of Cockney gangster played by Bob Hoskins, who basically has all the kind of Thatcherite goals. You know, he wants to take advantage of shrinking industry and buy up the dock lands, and sort of he's teaming up with like private investors who are actually the mafia. You know, he exacerbates things in Ireland by like starting a war with the IRA, who come over and like start bombing his little chiefdom. You know, so like so there's lots of parallels. You know, and he's just this kind of like pathetic little Englander who like just wants who's like, you know, who just like wants to expand his empire, and like it doesn't matter who stands in his way. And and what he does is he overreaches. You know, he kind of overestimates his power, a bit like Thatcher did towards the end. Like, you know, her hubris brought her down really. So there's a lot of parallels. But it's just a really good thriller, a really good kind of ticking time bomb thriller, a really good picture of that time in England where there were these kind of little Del boys kicking around who sort of saw opportunity around the corner. And it's interesting to see, this is the thing about Thatcher. Thatcher did have supporters, like is you know, she's a psychopath, but people liked her because they felt that she was she was all about the individual, and she was up for helping these kind of little entrepreneurs who thought, as long as I get by, it doesn't matter how the rest of society does it, And this is Bob Hoskins' whole attitude. He wants to take everyone down as long as he can sort of succeed, and everyone else fails. He's fine with it. So it's a nice sort of analogy for her career. But yeah, just an excellent thriller. It's got like an amazing cast. Like Helen Mirren, it's one of her early roles. She's like Bob Hoskins' wife. She's this kind of gangster mole who's like, you're never quite sure which side she's on. It's got Charlie from Casualty, who turns up. He's wearing this amazing sort of like sheepskin coat, and he's like the kind of right hand man. Pierce Brosnan is like this really ridiculously beautiful assassin, like IRA assassin who appears. So there's lots of kind of great stuff in it. And interestingly, John McKenzie, he's best known for sort of all his Play Today films. He made it like Just Another Saturday, which was his really good sort of Orange March film, like Elephant's Graveyard with Billy Connolly. And it's interesting that all these directors, like Mike Leigh, like Ken Loach, who else? Like Alan Clark, all made sort of TV in the 70s, then came up and basically turned against Thatcher. And it was interesting just thinking, like, where are those filmmakers now? Like, where are the filmmakers who are against the current regime? So I was thinking about that while thinking about this one, like how cool that when Thatcher was in power, that there was all these kind of filmmakers who are ready to like sharpen the knife and make kind of great films about how awful she was. And I can't really see that happening now,
You mean you don't like Kenneth Branagh's whatever the fuck that was, him playing Boris Johnson? Oh. You don't think that's like cinema's rebellion?
I thought you were talking about Belfast.
No.
Kenneth Branagh taking a couple of big shots. Two things about that are kind of particularly key to note for this conversation. One, people coming up doing things in the 60s and 70s and then moving on to them in the 80s. Maybe some of the things that Margaret Thatcher did have resulted in a removal of the steps you need before getting to make a film. We'll maybe come on to that later, he said, pointing at Lewis. But also to any British people and chiefly English people, I would please ask you, Google Ireland once. just one time. One time's enough, and then you'll be aware of it, and you'll be aware that it is a thing. Because this did also come up in The Attic, the idea that, like, Margaret Thatcher decided she was going to go absolutely hog wild in Ireland, and she basically just got into loads and loads of... Basically tried to effectively start a war with the IRA. Mm-hmm. And then started complaining when they started fighting it. Because this was around the time of all the kind of May's prison hunger strikes and Bobby Sands and things like that as well. So truly, scorched earth everywhere. Cannot stress this enough. We're not fans. So we will come to Lewis shortly, but Anahit, what did you want to talk about to kind of add to this pile on?
This pile on. My favourite thing to do.
The deserved pile on.
I should say, when we were like planning this episode, there was a point where we were like, well, we'll do about Thatcher like against. And Peter was like, should we bring someone on that's for? It was like, where would we find them?
I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me, etc., etc.
I mean, Liz Truss isn't doing much now.
Yeah, that's true. She could come on. Friend of the pod. Oh my God. So I wanted to talk about Pride, which is slightly basic bitch, but it is genuinely one of my favorite films. And also I didn't have time to watch anything else. So that's what we're doing. Which is, I think like most people probably will have seen it. If you haven't, oh my God, you have to go and watch it. It is genuinely one of the sweetest, nicest films of all time. It's set during the miners' strike, was made in 2014, I think, has like this incredible cast of like Dominic West, Andrew Scott, George Mackay when he was still like a bit of a baby, like, Imelda Staunton, Bill Nighy, oh my God, like this incredible, incredible cast. And it's set during the miners' strike, and it kind of focuses on the real life solidarity that a group of queer people called lesbians and gays support the miners. That's what they're called, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it stands for, LGSM. The kind of solidarity that they extended towards the miners by helping them raise money, by helping, like, they put on this enormous concert that I think Bronski played at, which is like so fucking sick, called, Yeah, the Fits and Perverts.
Fits and Perverts
Yeah,
concert.
like concert, which was just like very cool. So they were just like sick. And this film is just a really like gentle, very easy to watch, but very like stunning example of like how solidarity operates. So the idea that you don't just like help or care for your own. So the kind of minors end up like helping the queer community end up helping the minors. It's not just that you're helping your own within your own kind of like marginalized group. Has like this really beautiful energy, really great soundtrack. Side note, one of the things I really loved about Blue Jean was, what is it called? Oh my God, my mind. New Order. Yes, New Order's Blue Monday, which is just like, whenever that comes up in a film, you're like, this is going to be a fucking banger. And yeah, it's just like very sweet and funny and warm, but also very like politically angry and kind of dressing up this very strident kind of anti-Thatcher critique in what is like quite a palatable and easy to watch like British comedy drama. And I guess like it makes me wonder, because it is such a, like films like that, like Billy Elliot, that are these kind of great like crowd pleasing films. These are not sort of like, you know, very like small indie political whatever. It is just really interesting, kind of like my Letterboxd review said, how much British cinema is just like obsessed with this period of kind of the Thatcher government. And I do wonder if it is partly because it was like a time that was caught at two such extremes. So you have like the rise of the queer scene, you have like the punk movement, you have this almost like kind of rising anti-capitalist sort of sentiment. And then you have this enormous like harsh authoritarian rule. And I think that tension potentially is, because it feels like in cinema and in British culture generally, apart from World War II, it is where people keep returning to the most. And Pride was made about four years into the current long stint of the Tories. And I think there is also an element of you're like trying to look back and look at like understand how we ended up where we are right now, right? Like so much of what Thatcher did, like the dissolution of the NHS, the welfare state, like anti-protest, anti-strike, like it feels very, like you were saying before, like it feels very prescient to now. And I think films like this, like they maybe help us understand a little bit why we're so fucked. And yeah, Pride is a really lovely example of that. It also has like one of the best endings of any film ever. I like cry and cry and cry. I think the last election, the 2019 election, I was so numb that I physically couldn't like emote about it for days. And then eventually, like after 3 days, I was like, I have to watch Pride because I have to cry. Like I have to get over this. I need catharsis. And it worked. So yeah, it's great.
It's a very good film.
It's a very good film.
Is it on anything?
I don't know. God, was it on Netflix?
My friends
at one
all have
point?
like DVDs that they pass
Yeah.
on because it keeps going off and coming on, and
Yeah.
you can't.
It's very accessible. Oh, yeah, you can watch now apparently with a Netflix subscription, and apparently it's also on Disney Plus, which
Wow.
feels weird. It feels like it can't be on both.
It'll be on something.
It'll be on something.
Yeah.
You can watch it.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the thing about, so then to bring it kind of full circle, when we talked about why there maybe aren't as many films coming along and why there isn't that kind of groundswell of new filmmakers, one of the things about Thatcherism was a lot of it was kind of powered by privatizing and selling off and reducing the role of the state in your life, which means that when you get 20 years down the line, the effects of what has been done 20 years hence are still very visible. And a film that is all about kind of set against this backdrop is the one that Lewis wants to talk about, The Full Monty.
The Full Monty.
Which is set in the kind of aftermath of industrial collapse, basically.
Yeah, it's a bit cheeky of me because I've like gone and done a film that came out after the Thatcher government and is also, I think, set after the Thatcher government. But it overlaps for me a lot with Pride because it's about working class solidarity, building communities, queer acceptance, except it doesn't have that sort of anti-Thatcher text that Pride certainly has. I think there's a point in Pride where Bill Nighy just shouts into the hills at Thatcher or something like that. Thatcher isn't mentioned in the film, Monty, you know. That instead, there is no place for the anger to be directed. The you know, Thatcher is gone. It's just the consequences, the state of the world that she's left it in. So if anybody hasn't seen the Full Monty, it often winds up on those TV shows that are like Britain's top 100 film countdown things. and is about 6 men, many of whom were former steel workers in this like town in or near Sheffield or something like that, which is now a like post-industrial wasteland. They just sit around in like scrap yards all day and like grafting and stuff like that. And they decide, in order to make money, because they're heavily impoverished, to put on a male striptease show like the Chippendales. And that's the thing, it's like, you know, like Pride, quite family friendly. Well, not family friendly in the sense that it's about nudity, but it's quite fun and uplifting. And
Like,
it's,
I watched it as a kid, for sure.
yeah, it's very heartwarming. And also massively educational in class issues and stuff like that. But despite that, it's also quite realistic. Like, it covers so many bases, where the reason that these people are successful in what they do, even though they don't have the background or the chiseled bodies of Chippendale dancers, is because they're part of the community. Like, they make it key that the reason everyone wants to come and see them get their kit off is because they all know these people. And the fact that they don't look like Chippendales is like massively part of their conflict overcoming this, with Mark Addy, who has the most like heartbreaking arc where he just doesn't accept, like, he can't do it because he has such poor body confidence, but his wife is there for him. And it's just like really prescient in pointing out the role that the community had, that people's spouses had in like uplifting them, and also queer acceptance is a part of it. There is a gay romance that becomes like yet another B plot. Slight segue. It's the funniest 2 characters, one of whom is introduced waiting in a car on the side of the road, and they humorously don't realize he's trying to kill himself. They're like, okay, so we've like, you know, jump started your car, you've given you directions, you're on your way, see you later. Oh God, wait a minute. And then there's another guy who shows up at auditions but can't sing or dance. However, the second that they see his penis, they're like, you're in. So really funny, but also just like covering a lot of bases. And even though it can't be as forthright in its political education, in its like textual, in its textual discursion of what has caused this and what can be done, it sets really good role models out of its characters, who are, you know, accepting and supportive to one another. And it also has a plotline in there about the guy's son, who is, you know, a kid who's struggling to accept that his dad is like this desperate grafter, until the fact that he like brings a community together, which like puts home the idea that it doesn't matter what you do, it just matters that you do it right, and you bring in everyone that you can, and you correctly identify, you know, where that rage should be diverted. So, a really good film. Lots of different levels for something that has such a wide appeal, and can't recommend it enough.
I honestly thought when you said if you're gonna I thought you were gonna start singing Wham when you. I thought he was gonna start telling me that if I was gonna do something, I should do it right. So, The Attic, the Adam Curtis documentary, is on the BBC iPlayer. The Long Good Friday isn't streaming on anything yet, but it is on Film 4 on the 10th of February, so it'll probably be on the Channel 4 website after that. Pride is on Netflix and Disney Plus, and The Full Monty is on Disney Plus. All good films. Go and watch them. You might learn something. Maggie, 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 out, out, out. Honk, honk, honk. We got her.
Yeah,
Folks, we got her.
We need to play that punk song. What was the song out of Legion? Where is it? It goes Maggie. Oh, can't remember.
I thought you were talking about the one from Wizard of Oz that like went to the top of the
The
charts.
Witch.
Yeah.
Ding Dong,
the Witch is Dead.
Yeah.
That was so funny. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Everyone that was outraged, like, get a life.
Okay, and before we go, we're going to talk about some stuff that we're looking forward to. Jamie is off to consult a column that he wrote last week. In the meantime, I can tell you that Fire of Love, the craft, what's it, Maurice and what's... Katia and Maurice Craft documentary that's just been nominated for an Oscar is getting 3 free screenings at the Cameo this weekend. And I think National Geographic are on like a kind of Oscar nom victory lap. So
Oh, good for them.
it is on Friday and Saturday about 6 o'clock-ish, and Sunday morning at 11 a.m. So if you want to see some volcanoes and some great hats, that's at the Cameo in Edinburgh. and free. So go and check it out. And the other thing I wanted to flag up was a new film club at the CCA called Inclinations, which is a kind of like DIY volunteer run film club thing, like series of screenings, and they're screening Just Don't Think I'll Scream, which is an essay film by a French filmmaker called Frank Beauvais, and it is made up of the just like excerpts of the 400 or so films that he watched over a 4-month period of like isolation in his house.
Fucking hell.
With like a kind of voiceover over the top. As we discussed from my mentioning of Adam Curtis, this kind of thing is extremely my shit. So there we go. So that's 2 things I'm looking at. So that's at CCA on the 8th of February. Jamie, have you found anything in the work of Jamie Dunn that you want to recommend?
Well, I was going to suggest there is a cool series of German films from the Wehrmacht era coming up.
Oh, that was in the heads up as well.
Oh,
I also
there
read
you
about
go.
this. I did not remember.
So if, German Expressionism is your bag, you get Dr. Caligari, you've got Metropolis, M, there's more in that series. So always good to revisit those films, they're great. And again, another, political movies as well.
Lewis, do you have anything?
No.
Excellent. Well, I don't think Annie's got anything. I think we're probably done. So, thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this, then, just follow the pod wherever you get your pods, subscribe, whatever the button on your various things is called. Because every time I'm like, subscribe, someone tells me there's no subscribe button. It's follow instead on Spotify. It's like, you'll work it out. But anyway.
Who is telling you that?
Subscribe to the pod. You can follow us on social media at The Skinny Mag. And you can find all of our individual handles in the show notes of this episode. Thanks to Josh and Upload Studios, uploadstudios.co.uk. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. Margaret Thatcher, we're all glad she's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye,
totally.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.